Hello guys and welcome to the DevOps Guy channel. In this video we will be touching upon the VPC endpoints. How can we configure VPC endpoints and what are the uses? Since we have already covered the basics of VPC and how to create them along with subnets and route tables, we will straight away go to VPC endpoints. VPC endpoints allow you to access the AWS services from your VPC using the internal routing mechanism of the AWS. You don't have to go via the internet to access those services when you are using VPC endpoints. VPC endpoints basically NATs the traffic between your VPC and to the AWS services because the entire stack is already on AWS infrastructure and hence this service is auto scalable. So when your traffic or your demand increases, it auto scales on its own without your intervention. VPC endpoints are of two types, interface and gateway. Interface endpoints basically have an public IP, which is basically your entrance point of your traffic from the VPC, and that traffic gets in via that IP gets into the service endpoint, while the gateway endpoint is a route table entry which basically routes your traffic to that specific service via your VPC endpoint. Let's try to create an endpoint. These are the list of endpoint services provided by Amazon. As you can see, most of them are interface endpoints. Here is the list, and let's try to get the gateway endpoints. Currently there are only two services which are supported by gateway endpoints. One is S3 and another one is DynamoDB. Let's try to create a S3 endpoint. Let's search for S3, click on the endpoint now, and then you will have to select the VPC. We will be selecting VPC 1, and then these are the route tables. If you can see above, the route tables that you select, a rule in that route table for these VPC endpoint will be added automatically. We will select both the route tables that we had, and this is the policy, so you can control access to your S3 buckets via this policy. In case of other endpoints, you can control access to a read, write, list, modify, and a more granular control over your AWS services. Right now we will go with full, but you can have a custom policy being set here. These are again the tags. Let's add a tag name, and let's name it S3 endpoint for our test VPC, or let's create it, and our endpoint is created. Let's check the console, and you can see the endpoint is immediately available because it was one of the gateway endpoints. Endpoint type is gateway, private DNS names is not enabled. This is the VPC ID, this is the service name, and then you have route tables which are associated or which have this VPC endpoint. You can add or modify the route tables again from the console. This is the policy. You can again further edit the policy as per your needs. And these are the tags. Now for this endpoint, there will be rules created in our route table automatically, as it was mentioned while creating the VPC endpoint. And as you can see, a rule with PL hyphen is already added. If you click edit on the routes, this rule is by default added to both the subnets that we chose while creating the endpoint. Let's create an interface endpoint now. Let's search for EC2 endpoint. We will be creating an endpoint service for EC2. Click on that, and then our VPC 1. And yes, we will have to select all the subnets in which the service or the endpoint has to be available. We only have two subnets configured right now, hence those are by default being enabled. Enable the DNS names here, And then we can also attach a security group for these interface endpoints, and we can select the specific ports where we want to have access to. And then again, as per the gateway endpoints, we have the policy here as well. And let's add a tag name EC2 endpoint for our test VPC. And let's create the endpoint created, and as you can see it is in pending state. So that means there is an infrastructure that has to be made available before you can use the interface type of endpoints. This is because based on the subnets that you choose, based on the service that you choose, new instances will be launched in the backend, and there would be IP addresses that have to be allocated, and the DNS names also have to be registered for these endpoints. As you can see, private DNS names is enabled. We have a private DNS name, the default one set, and these are the additional DNS names available for this endpoint. The service name is EC2. It's an interface type of endpoint. Let's go on to the subnets. You can manage the subnets here. It is disabled because the endpoint is still in the pending state. These are the security groups. You can add and edit the security groups here. And this is again the policy. You can control the granular level of access. You can also set up notifications based on the events, which are delete, accept and reject. And the tags part, so it will take some time for this endpoint to be available. So now our EC2 interface endpoint is created now. As you can see, the status is shown available now. So this completes creation of the interface endpoint. Now one thing to note here is you don't need to add a route table entry as was with the case of gateway endpoints, because AWS takes care of routing the traffic for interface endpoints directly with the private DNS names as we created. So we don't really need to add anything in the route tables now. This completes the session on VPC endpoints. For more such videos, stay tuned and please subscribe to the channel.